Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to another awesome day. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTrain.tv, where we create great FileMaker training every day. We create it every day, pretty much, even sometimes on Saturdays and Sundays. But mostly we do broadcasting Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock. So we do our live training here. If you go to the website where I guess I share my screen briefly here. Let me try that. Let me share my screen. If you go to FMTrain.tv, and then let's see if I can make it full screen and then zoom in a little bit. You can see the upcoming broadcast schedule here. It's pretty awesome. Today is day 2 of a 3-day broadcast set on FileMaker Server. It's a new release of FileMaker Server, which includes the shipping final, I don't want to say final version, but the first publicly what we call golden master version of the Linux release. So we'll start to talk about that today. We'll continue the conversation tomorrow. If you missed yesterday, I highly recommend you go back and watch it. We covered a lot of important low-hanging fruit, and as a result of that, for those of you starting today, it'll be useful. Today's kind of open Q&A and discussing some WebDirect issues, things like that. It's not a design course today, so some of you might see Nick kind of trolling around. He's kind of lonely. Mostly today is about server configuration, server setup. It's not about lean design or design of any type whatsoever. And then, of course, Thursday, Nick does get to come back, talk about wrecking solutions. And then on Friday, we have a Dead Bird Friday. For those of you on Discord, you can see the picture of me grunting with that weird grimace on my mouth face there. It was all good until I had that grimace. It looks like someone was poking me in the ass with a sharp stick, and I'm holding the sign up at the same time. So it's pretty good artwork there for those of you on Discord. We are broadcasting in high definition. So if I come over here and I go to, well, let me see if I can do that. Now, can I do that? Oh, here it is. I stop sharing. So we are broadcasting in high definition on YouTube, Twitch, and Discord. A lot of people start off in YouTube and Twitch, and then eventually they kind of move over to Discord because there's this more evolved kind of conversation. Mostly Discord is full of interesting conversation, and then when Nick's here, he just fills it full of random memes during the day, so we lose all the questions. We do have J.A. McRae from Saskatchewan. Fun fact, she says, we don't set our clocks forward backward. We just live in 1975 perpetually. Which is pretty awesome. And then, of course, they do have bears there. There's someone else from Saskatchewan that's there as well. And then we got Michael Gravel from Montreal. So welcome him as well. And then the Discord, so we have some people that lurk. They hang out, they watch, but they don't really do too much directly. And so they hang out and they're lurking on Twitch and YouTube. Feel free to ask a question and be involved. This is about your question, especially today. Today's kind of like a Friday open question day, but it's really, we have the server guy here, one of our server people. We have several server people. This is by far the most talented server guy I know. And so that's pretty good. Oregon Dean is lurking with marginally inappropriate artwork. That's awesome, Oregon Dean. Thank you. Just remember that there are people here who may not appreciate your sense of humor. Once again, reminder that even though it might be election day, the world's burning down, we try to steer clear of politics and religion here, only from the standpoint that pretty much half the people here will think you're a moron if you say something, and the other half will agree with you. And if you want to, if you piss off half the people in the world, if a 50% score on your test is an F. Okay, I hate to break it to everyone. So that's why we steer clear of that. Okay, cool. Scott Henderson is there. Yeah, so Scott Henderson is there as well. So that's awesome. So welcome, everyone. Of course, we got Canberra, Dave, 3, like 4 or 5 Daves. Dennis Chow, Dirk, Ed, Foxy Jack, Kadidi, Jericho 1, John Haggerty, Kyle, Mikey, M. Johnson, which is another Mike. Normally lurks later, comes late, and then asks questions. But he's here early, which means he will have an opportunity to ask questions earlier than Oregon Dean with his marginally insensitive memes that are flying around there. Haley, is that meme offensive to you or
No.
on the edge of offensive? No, not yet. Okay,
No.
well, you're just giving Oregon Dean room to make it more crazy.
I know.
And so, yeah. So anyway, and then of course we got Scott, another Scott, and then TK55678. Freudian slip. Sorry about that. He is our moderator. We'll run around and post things and stuff like that. So Yesterday we talked about the FileMaker server release 19.1.2 is a server release. FileMaker Pro is 19.1.3. The numbers don't really match. It's kind of like the Wild West on versioning numbers. So I'm going to quit looking at Discord because all it is memes. There's actually no questions in here. Brutterman's there. Welcome, Brutterman. If people have a question, we may have to send the questions to YouTube where we can actually get questions without memes. So up front, Jacob Taylor, are you there? You want to give us an update on WebDirect and where you can deploy WebDirect. So Jacob has been in a knife fight. You've been in a knife fight with.
Yeah, basically. We actually had a call with.
Oh, do we have the artwork somewhere? Where'd that artwork go? Can you show that artwork? Did we get the artwork?
Posted it. Ooh, I could probably.
Why don't you get it real quick and then show your screen? You can share it. But some of so let me give the backstory on this. So let me just help everyone out here real quick. So Jacob, you're going to prep for that diagram. Here's the backstory. So Clara says, hey, yeah, I use WebDirect. It's a client. It's fantastic. It's great. Okay. So, and then you got like Nick out there who thinks it's great. Like the one guy who thinks it's really fantastic. There's more than one guy that thinks it's fantastic. I think the promise of it's good, but there are spots. It's more technically demanding in terms of lean design. You've really got to be lean when you work with WebDirect. You can't just throw together ugly databases. Not so much ugly, but just if you have no experience and you build a WebDirect solution, understand you're going to get to a point where you're going to have to rebuild it again to make it higher performance, right? It just can't scale. If it's you and 5 people, it's not a problem. But if you're going to make it for 50 or 100 people at the same time, yeah, that's going to be potentially a problem. Now, WebDirect, understand, is a web browser reproduction of your FileMaker layout. So if you're build it in FileMaker Pro, then WebDirect reproduces it, gives it to you in a browser. Works great generally. It does a pretty amazing job considering how complicated FileMaker is. Here's the problem. So WebDirect is a web browser, or correction, it's a web browser on your side talking to a web server, like Apache or IIS. Those are web servers. And that IIS is talking basically at the end of the day to a FileMaker server, and in between there are a bunch of different layers of things, and one of which is this WebDirect rendering engine, whatever you want to call that. And whenever I've had several customers where there's like things that you do like as a consultant before you, like I have an engineer who continuously likes to promise things to people he hasn't done before, and he gets himself in a lot of trouble. And so to prevent that from happening to you in WebDirect, what I recommend is understanding that if you have to play with WebDirect and deploy WebDirect before you start promising it to people. That goes without saying on all technology, but really WebDirect too. Additionally, you need to be careful about where you deploy WebDirect. I have a general rule that is, if you want to deploy WebDirect, generally you need to put it up on Amazon. It needs to go on Amazon because I can pretty much guarantee that if we put it on Amazon, it will work. We're running into situations where customers are in the enterprise, a company with at least several hundred employees, if not bigger, and they have an IT group. The IT group has their own data center, own server room, or whatever they have, and they can't make it work. Now, they can't make it work for a variety of reasons. Partly it's their fault because most of the people who do this, they don't like FileMaker. They're looking for a reason for it to fail. They're not really invested in the success. So as a result, when it gives them problems, they don't really feel like working through the issues. That's kind of one thing that's working against you, right? There's not a lot of support for that. If it was Microsoft WebDirect, there'd be a lot more people in support of it, but it's actually not. It's this Apple thing, right? And WebDirect has some very specific dependencies that are a little unusual when you're setting up a server. If you put it on Amazon, I know it works, but I've had now this 2 or 3 now data center people where they have to basically throw it out and either dump FileMaker entirely or use FileMaker Pro and Go, which I consider a superior solution. They have to go that way because that removes all the complexity out of it. So Jacob, are you ready to kind of talk about this setup a little bit?
Yeah, so I haven't done my screen share here, but I've got the pictures drawn up, and
why don't you go ahead and screen share and
we'll do that. We'll kick that off. All right. Can people, I guess maybe people in Discord, if you can confirm it's like legible, kind of. So what this is, you guys can see from this picture. So what we're aiming for here is on the right side of this picture, this the little stack is your database server. That's going to be your main FileMaker server, what they call the master server. And that's where your database lives, basically. That's where FileMaker server proper is installed. Awesome.
Which box is this? Which box is this?
The one on the right, it's labeled LAN private IP.
Okay. Okay.
So that's going to be your FileMaker server. So what we're describing here is what Claris calls a WebDirect worker situation. So in a what is probably a normal installation of FileMaker, frankly, WebDirect ends up on the same machine as FileMaker server, and so this whole thing, the complication that you're looking at, doesn't exist because, of course, if your FileMaker Pro can reach the server, so can a web browser. Outside of other networking issues that might happen. And so none of these issues exist. You open your web browser, you go to FMI WebD, and WebDirect's there. And you can do whatever you're going to do with your applications. And Nick can tell you all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with your applications from WebDirect. So in this scenario, what we're aiming for is, so if your solution, maybe it's a NIC-built solution, and you're going to have, let's say, 400 users in WebDirect. That's not certified. You can't realistically do that on one machine anyway. And so what you can do is the database server becomes its own machine, and then you take WebDirect and you put it out. You put the horsepower using portion of WebDirect somewhere else. You put it on another computer somewhere. If it's 400, Claris is going to tell you to put 4 WebDirect workers, basically. Yep. Just like he's circling. So that's what that'll be. And so what those will be is your users will access those WebDirect workers instead of going directly to the FileMaker server. So what this kind of chart here, and this is the original one from Claris, is trying to establish is, hey, if you guys in a sort of enterprise scenario are going to be wiring this up, here's what you need to allow through your firewall, various directions, to make this work. And so as you can see, the kind of big chunk on the right side is here's what communication needs to happen between the WebDirect workers and the FileMaker server, kind of behind the wall, if you will. And then in front of it, it's wherever these web browsers are that are going to be talking to the WebDirect worker, what they need to be able to do. And so on the left side, you can see the list is much shorter because port 80 and 443, functionally, those are your standard web ports. And so you can poke 1 or 2 holes and be done, basically. So one of the things that we've discovered, and I'll take this as the moment to swap out with our updated graph here. I know it looks almost exactly the same, but you notice the red text over there in the corner. So one of the things we have basically documented from Claris at this point. So in this, this slightly changed graphic we have here with the additional red text, one of the things that we learned from Claris is actually the web browsing clients don't only need to be able to talk to the WebDirect worker. So the way most people think about this is there's 3 kind of columns here. Those things can kind of be separate. So, the network firewall really is like a dividing area. Yeah. And so as long as from right to left, as long as FileMaker server can talk to the WebDirect workers and the WebDirect workers can talk back to FileMaker server, we're good. And then separately, as long as web browsing clients can talk to the WebDirect worker and obviously the WebDirect worker can reply to the web browsing client, we're good. That's kind of on the face of it, that's what people are going to look at this graphic and see and go, oh, okay, cool. Makes sense. It's like any other web browser proxy server.
Can I help real quick with this here? Sure. So for those of you who don't understand, so this is your company inside network. And what companies like to do is instead of the company being here and the public being here, and there's only one firewall, they create this thing that you've heard the term over and over, and I guess in Korea it's more of a thing these days, but they have a demilitarized zone. So this is your secret area in the company, this is the public internet, and then we have this semi-secure area in the middle they call the DMZ or demilitarized zone. It's a military term. It's where they put all the landmines and bombs and guys with machine guns so you don't go back and forth. The problem is that they then put these giant concrete walls up, and then these are all the exceptions to the walls, and they want a handful of exceptions here, but they really want almost none to go all the way through, right? Because that's the threat vector, is someone to come all the way through. You poke a hole over here, you poke the same hole over here, you come all the way through, and then it's why do we even bother with a firewall? Because people can go all the way through. And if you look at this, if I read this correctly, they have to go port 80 from here all the way into here. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I have written from Claris. It was relayed to us by Claris tech support, but it's from engineering when they asked about when they were asked about this. The problem I was having with a client, and they're probably not in the stream today, but I'll be writing this email up for them, and probably having a meeting as a result of it. But the short version is they have what Richard described, which is a double layer of defense in depth for their network. And so in their case, the FileMaker server is within a little, basically it's a VPN inside their network. It's a little bubble of networking that can happen there. And so the FileMaker server is in there. The people that need to access the FileMaker server via FileMaker Pro or Go are on that VPN, and it's a small department of the company. They have a FileMaker application. So those people, they have no issue. There's never been any problem because they're using FileMaker Pro.
So the internal people are over here on this right side then.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. So there's little people over here,
and they have no problem at all.
So they're fine, right? Okay.
Yep. But outside of those people, there's another, so that's inside of an interior bubble. There's an exterior bubble, which would be the left network firewall here, that is a big proxy machine, basically. And so anything, unprivileged people, people not in that department, whatever, they're all inside of that kind of outer bubble. I gather there's multiple other bubbles for each of the little departments and stuff. And then there's like one big outer ring is how I'm envisioning it anyway. And so they put the WebDirect worker out in kind of the outer ring. It's not in this super private secret area on the right side, but it's also not just hanging out on the internet completely. And the short version is that doesn't work particularly well. And in this case, in their case, I don't think it can work. And so what we've figured out is, so when you set up a WebDirect worker, so just to be clear for everyone, they've allowed all the networking. The FileMaker server and the WebDirect machine can communicate with each other without issue. So if I set up a WebDirect worker and I say the WebDirect worker and I give it its own internal IP for its address, and then I give it the FileMaker server internal IP for that address, everything works. But the problem with that is the people that are trying to access WebDirect are totally outside of this company's network, outside the front door client's internet in this thing. And so none of those people can access any of those internal IP addresses definitionally because they're not on the network. They're outside somewhere. So the issue that they are having basically is that when you set up a WebDirect worker, you tell it what the FileMaker server address is, like what the IP is, if you're going to use that, whatever, and then what the WebDirect worker address is. So if it's going to be outside somewhere, it's going to be accessible from outside the network on the internet. They have a subdomain on their corporate domain that they've set up. They, deployed an SSL certificate. They all the best practices, no problem at all. And it works. I can access it from my house, so I know that part of it's working. The problem that they're running into is that when you set up a WebDirect worker, you have to put that external address in the WebDirect worker as its public address. But in a network design like this, where there's defense in depth, that's the front side of the WebDirect worker, not the back side of the WebDirect worker.
Okay, so let me help with this a little bit. So there, if you have a machine here, one of the common defense techniques, and some of you know this probably better than we do, or better than I do, probably, I don't know, Jacob is pretty damn smart, but these machines here will have a private internal IP address or name, and then there will be a kind of a public address and name. So as people come to it from the public, somewhere along the line it translates, and then it uses the internal address. And the rub is that what we're saying is that in order for this to work, we have to give it its secret internal name to the public. Is that what we're saying here, Jacob?
It's actually the opposite, and that's why it doesn't work.
So
to set it up the way that it would need to be to work flawlessly, I'll just say, let's ignore all the network problems. You would put their corporate subdomain that is for these WebDirect workers into the WebDirect worker. But what that also means is that the FileMaker server, it gets communicated that information. So it's going to try and talk to the WebDirect worker using that corporate subdomain. But that's outward facing, basically. And it can't communicate that far. There's too many layers of the network.
Yeah, so basically, once again, the short version of this is that trying to roll this out, WebDirect on a internal network in a corporate environment is tricky.
Yeah.
I think if you're a small business and you have your own server and you have a single server or even two servers side by side, and you have a static address where the traffic goes through that, because you're a small business, you're not as big of a target as you would be other places. It will generally work. Amazon, it generally works pretty well. We don't have too many problems with it. But I've had several enterprise customers lose their minds because of kind of the stuff that's going
This
on.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's kind of bizarre setup, and trying to talk to Claire's tech support. I mean, my senior engineers don't know anything about this, right? And that's a pretty high end person. And my senior engineers have more knowledge than Claire's is generally tier one tech support. So that's why generally when we have a problem, we don't call tech support. We only call tech support when there's some sort of weird port number, IP number issue. Then we talk to tech support. They actually have to go to their engineering guys, folks, gals, people, whoever they are, and get the information and bring them back. And that's how we got this. So that's why I'm trying to alert you folks to this issue. Where you park this and where it lives. If someone said to me, "Hey, Richard, here's $1 million," I would love $1 million. But we got $1 million. We want you to roll this out. A WebDirect at Boeing's internal data center for public-facing access outside. If you want to roll in the data center over here, then have your internal people access it this way, that might work.
That works great.
It can.
Yeah. I would, yeah, I'd say okay on that project actually, but it's the asterisk on that statement is if the FileMaker server and the WebDirect workers are going to be inside the bubble. If the answer to that question is yes, you'll probably be fine. They can make that work.
Operative work is probably, and then
probably, yeah.
Yeah. So David Angel says port forwarding. Is this basically port forwarding scenario? He's asking that question there.
I think he's asking about DMZ.
Okay.
Which is on residential networking hardware, which is where most people have seen that phrase that aren't doing military stuff. The way that they use that term is it's a full port forward. It's all ports forwarded to some particular host inside your network. And that's a good working description of what it is, but the DMZ is actually a more generic term than that. If you guys want to go Google stuff or if you're networking stuff, it's basically a one-to-one NAT. That's what they actually are. So,
okay,
that's a nice marketing term.
I know it's very deep, but this is unfortunately, I mean, it's one thing to build lean design, but before you can even get to the point where people can use the lean design, you have to actually make it basically work in general, and that's what, frankly, this conversation is about. If we were having this conversation about FileMaker Pro or Go, basically we're dealing only with port 5003. Is that the only one that they really use anymore for Pro and Go?
Yes, for record data. If you want to see the thumbnails from your containers, you have to do 80 or 443, depending on whether you have an SSL certificate.
Okay. So 80 and 443 to the FileMaker server and 5003. And every time you poke a hole in the firewall, the enterprise network people start to lose their shit. And I say that nicely, but not really. It's like when you come to them and you say, "Oh, we need all these open," every one of these is why, tell us why, prove it, justify this, why, tell us why, prove it, why, justify, and it's like, damn, right? And when Jacob Taylor comes to me with a list this big and I have to go to the IT group and say, I need all this and I need all this, expect a fight, because every time they poke a hole in the firewall, that's one more threat vector they have to worry about, right? And so that's kind of the rub there. Yeah, Ralph on YouTube is talking about it's making it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. I've set up numerous sites with RapidWeaver. I have no idea what RapidWeaver is or RapidBeaver or any of that, including offsite page, which links to FM Solution via WebDirect. Okay, well, offsite page I'm not too concerned about because that's not part of WebDirect. We're talking about in WebDirect, right?
Yeah, specifically WebDirect workers. If your WebDirect's on the same thing as your FileMaker server, you'll never see this diagram because it doesn't matter.
There are still other things that can get you in trouble on a corporate fire network. I've seen that before with the biotech company that got blown up with this was Biorad, one of the biopharmaceutical companies, and they couldn't make FileMaker work because their network was bolted down so tightly that even a single machine, if you combined all this together onto one machine, you put it on their network, it would not work. It was really crazy. Yeah, so Rapid Weaver is a web design software. Yeah, that's fine. We're not talking about design. We're talking about, yeah, you can design all you want. The rub is the routing of the traffic back and forth. It's yeah, a little bit different conversation. For a lot of you are not deep on this end of the pool, and I'm not picking on you. I used to be, and I'm less so now because I have other people that worry about it for me. Kyle Williams says port forwarding redirects traffic coming in, building. Port forwarding has to be programmed into the router. Yeah, I mean, normally this is, once again, different between a residential conversation. If a lot of you are dealing with teams of people, 5, 10, 15, 20, you're never going to deal with this kind of mayhem. This is when you start dealing with large deployments, and you're dealing with other people to support it, right? So you can deal, there's a defense contractor that we've worked with before, kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. And they've decided, because of who they are, that they don't want to trust Amazon because they figure that Amazon might, steal their information or stuff like that. And so that gets into an interesting conversation when you have basically IT departments basically specifically telling you what ports and what services and what data center technology you can use. Then you get yourself into a spot where you say, yes, you can make it work, but then really they put parameters around you where you can't make it work. And that's really, I'm just trying to keep myself from getting yelled at. If you folks want to learn from that and not get yelled at too, that's always good. If you're dealing with people, 5, 10 groups of people that are 5 or 10, and that's your FileMaker user base, you're probably never going to have this issue really.
Yeah, and you'll always be talking about port forwarding. Like, you go click the buttons on your router in your office or whatever. And this is like, they're having the conversations I'm having with this client is they're having to put in rules in multiple different places. And then there's a third place where they have documentation that says why the rules exist and that kind of stuff, so that the people above them can audit the changes. Hence the justifications Richard's talking about. And so yeah, they're on a different level. They have an entire IT department, and I'm actually not working with those people because they are very regimented, and there isn't a process to do the kind of weird special ninja stuff that we're trying to do that basically works around the policies, but still kind of, toes the policies. Mostly, I think.
Yeah.
And they'll just refuse to do things like that. And so I had to they have like a couple people on staff, one dude in Chicago, I think is where he is. And he's the person that can make things like, make cool stuff happen basically. And he has one boss that he can appeal to when he needs certain types of authority to be granted. So.
Okay, so there's a question here. Ralph Rainier was trying to simplify the conversation, a simple, easy interaction between a web page and FileMaker. Yeah, WebDirect is not, so it's really important to understand the differentiation between a web page driven by WebDirect and a web page that is just a PHP/DAPI data API web page, right? If you're looking for basic technology where you're having a web page interact with FileMaker, this diagram gets radically simpler, okay? We're talking about WebDirect, where it rebuilds the FileMaker interface for you in a browser. It's stuff that's totally controlled by FileMaker. You really can't go into this and code a front end, a new front end using HTML and those kind of conventional tools, right? So WebDirect is different than I frequently would refer to these as PHP pages, but really that's kind of a loose term. It's custom web publishing, which even now is a term that kind of Claris has, I guess, decided to go away from. But it's the idea that you're going to code and talk to a gateway, and you're going to send requests, and text requests come back. So really, all you need is port 80 and 443 for something like that. And that's super normal, super easy to do. Most companies have a very simple provision for how to handle that, right? There's a plan for that. They deal with that. When you start dealing with 5003, they're first going to want you to write a book about why is there 5003 and what are you doing with it. And then there's, of course, the 16,000, which has to do with administrative console management on the FileMaker server. And so there's all these extra things that go on when you're dealing with Pro and Go and WebDirect and administering the server. If all you're doing is just web page interaction management, it's mostly 80 and 443, and those are kind of known commodities. IT organizations generally, they may not like you to have access to those ports, but they won't freak out. They know what those are. It's a fundamentally known commodity, right? So once again, WebDirect, I'm pretty sure most everyone here understands that it's a little bit different. You don't have to be a coder to build WebDirect. You build a FileMaker layout, you turn on a couple switches, and it just works is the idea, right? The problem is that the back end of it, to make that, it's simple on the front end, the back end of this is complicated stuff, right? We wish it wasn't, but it is. The other way to kind of drive around this is to have go purchase the Cloud 2 technology. That's that service. So FileMaker takes all this, they abstract it out. You don't have to worry about it. They put it on their own. It's on an Amazon. Once again, Amazon's data centers where it goes, but they make all this work, right? And so that's another option. But once again, you're having to tell your IT organization to outsource or farm out that responsibility. They may not like that, right? It's like this defensive contractor won't allow us to farm out stuff to Amazon. We have to go to obscure other companies that probably are less secure, but it makes this IT group feel better at this major defense contractor, right? So, because they're building fighter jets and missiles and all sorts of stuff, and I'm sure somewhere you could weasel your way through the network to find that stuff. But we're just doing FileMaker stuff on pilot training, and this was a project for it was a civilian aircraft, but pilot training, because the planes are kind of a hot rod, and guys tend to kill themselves, or gals. I said loosely tend to kill themselves by hot rodding this plane because it. If you get a sports car, it's like the guy who got a Dodge Hellcat muscle car, and he got on and he went out and found this like runway. Actually, it was in Van Nuys and in Los Angeles. And he says, well, he bought the car. They said, oh, it's a car will go 200 miles an hour, and of course they gave this guy the keys. And he said, well, shit, let's see if it goes 200 miles an hour. And he pushes the pedal all the way down, holds it down, gets to 200 and whatever, gets to the last 500 feet or whatever, decides to put on the brakes, but to go from 200 some odd to 0 takes a little bit. The brakes get hot, and he ends up going off the runway and killing himself. So once again, just because it has a gas pedal doesn't mean you push it all the way down. That's your other life lesson for today. So the bunny is in the house. We got TK. And once again, I guess the conversation is a little bit on the deep end. I really apologize, Ralph, on that end of it, because this is talking about WebDirect and the enterprise mechanics of that. But we're dealing with kind of a complex couple days here of FileMaker server stuff. This is a FileMaker server update. Yesterday was on the new features of the server, the 19.1.2. If we have questions on that, that's great. Tomorrow, we can even start talking about today, the Linux version, right? And we're going to do a build tomorrow for that. Yep. And that's going to be 19.
We're going to walk through probably the whole setup. Actually, I think we can even go from launching the instance. I'm just going to start on CentOS's website and jump from there.
Okay, I'm going to jump out. I have to go to the bank and explain to them that I'm actually the only real Richard Carlton, and that whoever these other Richard Carltons are that are showing up are fake people. Legitimately, I have to go do that. So I'm going to step out, but if you guys want to ask questions and run it through, then Haley, you can help with the questions. That'd be great.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
All right, I'm going to step away. Thanks. Bye.
Kyle Williams says, we have a private server. Sometimes they use FMP host or other hosting services, but when you're using a private server, you're usually the one to manage all of it. Yep. It's really good to know the backend port forwarding stuff. Yeah. And like I said before, and like Richard said, even with smaller organizations, probably you'll end up with basically consumer networking hardware. And so it used to be more difficult when I started on computers 20 years ago, but these days you can go click on, there's like a web page on your router, and you can say, all right, this computer gets that port, this computer gets that port, you just click through it and hit save. And probably soon you won't even have to hit save, it'll just go. So, but for that stuff, that these conversations where you're setting up WebDirect workers and you've got like multiple kind of VPN and network ACL, access control list, layers of security, because you're trying to make sure things on the outside maybe can get into the like lower security area of the network, but definitely can't get into the high security part of the network. That stuff it makes this stuff a lot more difficult to deal with, basically. And so, like I said, if you're doing a single machine deployment, you'll probably just never have any issues, realistically. If you're doing a multi-machine deployment, if all of the the FileMaker and the WebDirect machines are in the same security layer, if you will, or the same bubble in the network, you'll also probably be fine, because that's a tractable issue. Even if you have issues getting the WebDirect workers to talk to the FileMaker server, stuff like that, if everybody that's accessing it is inside the bubble and the FileMaker stuff is all inside the bubble, your IT people will be able to figure that out. That isn't too much of an issue. It's where in this scenario with this client, where you're trying to traverse multiple, like each step of the application, FileMaker on the right side, WebDirect in the middle, and then people on web browsers on Chrome or whatever on the totally outside of the network. Each of those steps, there's places it can break down and where complexity is added, and so it's a pain. But anyway, the whole entire point of this was to say, just be aware if you're trying to set something like this up. People that are connected to the WebDirect workers, which are usually going to be web browsers, have to be able to talk to the master server as well. And that is not represented in there. This is the original version of the graph. It's not represented in that. So there's a couple scenarios under which they get passed back to the master server temporarily. So.
Okay. I do have a question from somebody on Twitch that's more of the documentation that Jacob, maybe you might know the answer to. They're just asking if we have any documentation to support the request for each of the port requirements for enterprise.
Yes, and you can get that out of Claris's help site. I can probably find and post the link. I could probably not during the broadcast, to be honest, because it would take me a minute to go find it. But this graphic is drawn, the original version of this graphic here is drawn from that page, and so they don't specifically document every single port. I can tell you what a bunch of them are, and they tell you what a bunch of them are. But for example, we don't get a lot of technical detail on port 16,001 and 16,002. Those are just labeled kind of internal communication between the worker and the FileMaker server. Those are on the there's a page you can get off of their documentation as well. That's like the master list of all possible ports you could ever imagine that FileMaker might use for any reason. I don't believe it's titled that, but it probably should be. And so it lists, basically what each port is and what it's used for. And so, yeah, you'll start at 80 and 443 and 5003, and most people know what those are. Again, 8443, they're for if you're just doing FileMaker Pro or Go, they're for the container data thumbnails. If you have that, otherwise you could theoretically just get away with 5003 if you have no containers. All that file upload, download, thumbnailing, all that stuff goes through port 80 or 443. 5003, of course, is record data. Everybody knows that port because it's the one that FileMaker has had forever. 16,000 theoretically is the admin console, is what most people think of it as, but it is a way to talk into administrative functions on FileMaker server, which is why it's there. But there's also, between those, if you need ODBC connections, there's a port for that. And so they have all this stuff labeled one by one as to what it does and under what situations you need it. And so it looks like Kyle has posted that in Discord at least.
Yeah, I'm going to copy that over to Twitch and YouTube.
Yes, that is the one that I want. Perfect. Let me open this on my actual browser that you can see here. So you'll have a page that looks something like this once it loads up. And so this is accurate for everything past 17, basically. And so you have your list, right? And so what these mean, and so they tell you, kind of what each thing does, what it's used for. And then some of them are like this one, it just says FileMaker internal, 3000 FileMaker internal. And so a couple of these are the two that are funny, the 16,001 and 16,002 here. That's just, they don't say what it's for, but you got to have it open. So 16,001 looks like it's mostly internal. Oh, local only. Okay, that makes sense. And 16,002. I feel my we'll say highly educated but totally guess is that 16,002 is probably the port over which a bunch of the kind of back-end functions for the WebDirect workers actually go. That's one of the ones that they have issues with. So for example, if you set up a WebDirect worker on another machine and you haven't you remember, you think about it and you're like, oh yeah, it's a FileMaker server, so I've got to have 80.443, 5003, and maybe you remember to put port 16,000 open, and this has to be open on the network and the host firewall as well. FileMaker does not. On Windows is particularly relevant. FileMaker does not open its own ports on the server, so you have to be aware of that. But if you did those and then tried to set up a WebDirect worker, it would fail. It would get most of the way there. It would be able to list the databases, but it wouldn't quite work. And it would tell you failed to connect, and that's because you forgot one of these 16,001 or 16,002 ports. So yeah, thank you, Kyle, for sharing that link. Actually, that's really helpful. But in any and all cases, this is the page that you'll look for. Like I said, some of these aren't going to be well justified. Some of them are just labeled, yeah, it's internal communication. Shh, we don't know what it does. But some of them are really obvious. So does anyone have any further questions? We're going to be doing Linux tomorrow. Like I mentioned before Richard left, I will probably start on. I'm gonna basically do what I did, because it took me. I took the long way around and ran into a couple problems and had to find the right place in the documentation and stuff. And we had somebody in stream here email me about it actually, but we're gonna do the abbreviated version of setting up a Linux FileMaker server on Amazon. I think that's gonna be the easiest and most straightforward thing to do. We won't mess around with the SSL certificate and that kind of stuff, but it was a pretty easy time, but we're going to have to stop at a couple of the steps and explain what it is and why.
Kyle says, we were discussing changing over to Linux. Not sure if QuickBooks Server works on Linux though. Ooh.
That is both an extremely good discussion and one I don't know the answer to actually. I would strongly suggest making sure that QuickBooks runs on the things that you need it to. If it doesn't run on Linux, then unless you're the most amazingly comfortable with Linux and you're okay running two machines or QuickBooks on the host operating system and then a VM or some weird combination like that, put Linux inside the VM virtual machine, then I'd just stick with Windows for the moment, probably, because that'll make it easier for people in the organization to maintain it as well, unless you're in one of those awkward situations where you have excellent support for Linux inside the organization and people are kind of lacking on Windows, which it's probably the opposite at a lot of our clients. Except maybe for us it's a lot of Mac users and then not so much Windows, but Oregon Dean had a good question, which is kind of a prompt. Do I want to philosophize about the scalability of WebDirect and the number of machines versus users? So I can tell you two facts that will guide you. One is, so Claris specifically endorses 100 connected WebDirect users per WebDirect worker, per machine, whatever. So if you have a single machine WebDirect deployment, they'll say, okay, you can do 100 concurrent WebDirect users on that machine. You're going to need some horsepower for that, obviously. A lot of CPU and RAM to get that done, but on one machine that will work. And then for workers, they say the same thing. So you'll have 100, basically per worker, and I think you can have up to 5 workers. I think. Don't quote me on that. It might be 4, but I think it's 5. I think it adds up to 500, basically 500 total WebDirect connections at a time. The other factoid that I can tell you is, so was it last year or maybe 2018, we did Melting FileMaker Cloud, which was a little sort of event that we did, and we bought the fanciest machine that they would let us have on FileMaker Cloud and had everybody beat their head on it. We got up to 180 something concurrent connected clients on WebDirect before it fell over. And so what I would say is 100 is both conservative, and also on Amazon that machine was $2 an hour. So it's got 16 cores and 64 gigs of RAM or something like that. It was a beast of a machine. And so you will run into limitations at some point. Also, it will scale okay. As always with WebDirect, the first question before user counts and stuff like that, how many users can you have and that sort of thing, the first question you always need to be asking is, has the thing been designed for WebDirect? Have you built either layouts for that, or generally, on kind of a lean design, Nick Hunter type conversation, have you designed for that in the first place? Because that will actually go a long way to being able to support more users at the same time. And that's just a big thing to keep in mind, because if you have a really badly optimized solution, what that is going to be is each of those users is going to be a really badly optimized user on the WebDirect machine. And so you're going to get, fewer users out of the same number of workers, or, some conversation like that. And so it actually may, depending on the hardware versus engineering costs for you, it may pay off to spend a little money optimizing for WebDirect versus buying more hardware, although usually just more hardware is the cheaper option for most businesses. And then I actually don't know. Sorry, yes?
No, go ahead. I do have another question that came up, but I'll let you finish.
I wanted to demonstrate, in case you guys, you should be able to see that. Yeah, good, it shows up. So in case you wanted to know about WebDirect on Linux, you're currently looking at it. So I think it works great. That's my answer. As you can see, it's Linux at rcc.com. That is our Linux server. It's the test one that we will probably demo at the very end tomorrow. I am just going to build a fresh one so you guys can see it all the way through. Yeah, it's the demo database that comes with FileMaker server. We haven't done literally anything to the server at all. Just set it up and put SSL. But nice. It works out of the box. We'll get to the fun part of that tomorrow, which is you'll need to probably reboot after you do the actual server install. Somebody else emailed me and asked about that. They ran into issues getting the Linux server to come up again after the software installation. And the short version is you need to reboot the machine. So make sure I share the SSL trick. Okay, I will do that.
A question that we have on YouTube from Michael, and I'm sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name based on the spelling. I'm not sure that it is, but they're saying our new partners from Calgary are experiencing delays from the server, which is located in Michigan. As a first move, they suggested to ping the server, but what should they check for after that?
Trying to think. Calgary and did you say Wisconsin or Michigan?
Michigan. Mm-hmm.
I think those are right across the border from each other, so that makes sense from a geographic perspective. The main thing I would check actually is do a couple things. Do like an internet speed test with those clients, and it isn't as much about the how many megabits they have, because above a certain point it doesn't really help you that much, but to make sure that they aren't having really high ping issues or packet loss. And you can Google around. There are some websites to they'll test it in your web browser for you basically and give you a little report, just like speed test will. There's just different versions of a speed test. And check that kind of stuff first. You might be having actual latency issues between the clients and the server. That might be an issue. But if you ping it and they're under 100 or even under 50 or 60 or something like that, that's probably not the problem. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. There are no other questions from that end or from Twitch for that matter. It's pretty quiet.
No, I was looking at, there's one, Canberra57 had a question over here about WebDirect. So he said, I'm only able to get the default FileMaker server website, and they thought they set up WebDirect on one database, at least one database. So one thing is it won't show you that for the homepage. I don't know if you've noticed it when I went to this is a Linux one, but it works the same on all of them. You have to be on whatever your server address is /FMI/WebD, or you're not going to see it in the first place. If you go to that and you get an error, what that means is you haven't turned on WebDirect correctly. So if you're on a very new version of FileMaker Server 18v2, I think, or newer, it doesn't come with Java anymore, and you have to provide your own Java to get WebDirect to turn on. That's not technically true on the Linux build. I don't want to get into that. We'll cover that tomorrow. But for all of you who are running Mac and Windows, you will need to provide your own Java. There's a couple different ways to do that, but I'll just use a friendly URL for WebDirect. That would be lovely. He's asking why won't FileMaker let us use a friendly address for WebDirect? Yeah, that would be lovely. I don't know. Probably just because it's always been the way that it is now, and changing it would break things or what have you. One of the things I actually like about the way they have it set up, I suppose it would be cooler if you just did, to use my browser that I have open here, Linux atrcc.com/FM server sample or what like that. I think that would be slick. Actually, one of the things that you can do here that's really cool though is you can link individually to these databases. I don't think you guys want to try and retype this address, but if you did that on your own server, it would take you right to the FM server sample if that was open on the server. And you can do that with any database as well. So if you are trying to create pre-built links for people, I actually like that part of it's useful, though. Yeah, you could probably cut out the WebD and whatever parts. David Angel, yes, it can be used with the CNAME, but that won't get rid of the path part of the web address, which is the FMI WebD FM server sample type stuff at the end. If you have an SSL certificate on the server, the CNAME will need to be covered by the SSL certificate, or that won't work, I think, if I understand CNAMEs correctly. I still, in general, would just recommend using a regular A record. Yeah, that's M. Johnson in Discord. That's a good solution. He says we have our own address that we give clients that just redirects you to the normal WebDirect address, so they don't have to remember it or type this thing in or find the right link or whatever. It's one of those things where you can just send them the right thing and say, here, click this, be done. And we do actually similar things, ironically, with FileMaker Pro for users, because I mean one of the wonderful things about FileMaker is you can be just dangerous enough to be useful with a lot of it, and so there's a lot of kind of lower people who are at the lower end of power users who aren't they're not amazing with computers or something like that, but hey, they can build a database that their business now relies on, and that's really powerful. So one of the things that we do to facilitate that for the people who are even kind of less skilled than they are, is we make launcher files, and it does the same thing. It's technically a FileMaker, a very tiny FileMaker database with a single layout and a single script that runs on startup or whatever, and it sends them to the hosted database wherever that is, and that's really useful for people that aren't amazing with FileMaker, aren't amazing with computers, and it's acts like a shortcut for them. They can put it on their Mac bar or pin it to Windows or something like that, pin it to their Windows bar, and it fires up FileMaker for them, puts them in the right place. If they, if you let them save their username and password for FileMaker, they don't even have to remember it, and that works pretty well actually. Yep, Linux tomorrow. Yeah, Oregon Dean, Linux tomorrow. Yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna spin up one from scratch. So. We're just gonna jump through that, and hopefully we'll hit the error that I hit the first time. That's ironic to say that, because obviously you'd want a perfect demonstration of a flawless install. But actually I want to, because I hit it and then someone emailed me about the problem, and so I'm hoping that it recurs so that I can show you guys what it looks like, because I think that's really helpful information for people that are going to run into it and get confused.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, yeah, excited for tomorrow, day 3, the last day. So come prepared with questions, and we'll see you guys all tomorrow. And thanks for joining us today.
Yep. Thanks everybody for showing up. Thank you everybody on YouTube, on Twitch, on Discord. Thank you for your questions. As always, I think I'm obligated to tell you guys about our training videos, which you guys know about already. You should go to FM Training TV and consider buying our stuff if you haven't already. That's what pays the bills and supports this whole thing going through. So again, as always, thank you all for showing up, and have a great day. Have a great rest of your week if we don't see you tomorrow.
All right, take care.
And the guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Trying to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap. Stands in, throws it left for Amendola. Reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10. Rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.